Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics. We get started as we do each week by introducing my co-host Ruben Bressler,
Well, hello there.
Aaron Campbell.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hey. And we get started as we do each week with the first pick. Now, the first pick is going over spoilers for Battle for Zendikar. Set looks fantastic. But we have to begin with the number one not close Reddit thread of the week, the spoiler being Meandering Towershell, who happens to come back every other spoiler season and is a brilliant joke. I love it. It's the best.
When I went on Reddit and this was the top thread, It's just like, what are you doing with your life and your choices, Reddit? But it's a funny joke.
It's good.
It's like a dad joke. It's like a Reddit dad joke.
It is. It's a very Reddit-y daddy joke. It's just awesome that we're not going to see it for the Overwatch.
Overwatch. No,
Yeah.
not Overwatch. That's the game that Blizzard's coming out with.
Oath
of the Gatewatch.
Oath of the Gatewatch, right?
There it is.
Because that's a great name for a set. But we will get started with some real spoilers. Nixilis Fuego, Kiora Enter the Octagon, and Sam Black Abomination. I'm going to bring them up on the screen right now. We're talking about Nixilis Reignited, Kiora Master of the Depths, and Smothering Abomination. All of these cards, pretty fantastic in their own right. They have their own conversations around them. We're going to begin with Nixilis Reignited, where it was basically set up next to all the other 5-mana planeswalkers that have ever existed, and the best one, probably Gideon Jura. And then more or less saying, like, could this card be good enough? We're not sure. It might be a role player. However, if you compare it to other card drawing engines from the recent past, it's still fantastic, and you're probably going to play it on a board that only has one creature, and so you're going to be able to get your Phyrexian Arena going and have to kill the creature, and then, like, its ultimate can kill that person really, really quickly. So that's a thing. But it is a 5-mana walker, and traditionally those, as good as they've always kind of looked, has not always kind of worked out. So, Ruben, what do you think about Nixilis?
So this was LSV's spoiler for this set, and he brought up the fact that usually when you look at a planeswalker, there are two things that you look at. Can it protect itself? And can it replace itself? Is it some sort of card advantage engine? Most planeswalkers are pretty good at one and somewhat passable at another, or completely ignore one of them. You know, Jace Beleren is a great card advantage engine, can't protect itself. There are a couple planeswalkers that are really good at protecting themselves and aren't really card advantage engines. They're sort of card quality-ish engines, like Liliana Vess, or Xenagos the Reveler is like sort of card advantage if you count tokens as card advantage and can also protect itself. But this does both better than any planeswalker I can think of. Destroying a creature is great. And draw a card, lose a life is one of the most powerful things that you can do in Magic since Necropotence was printed. The fact that it also comes onto the battlefield with 5 loyalty is no small feat in protecting itself either. So you can immediately tick it up to 6, and it can survive a Siege Rhino by itself. Just draw 2 cards, gain some amount of life if your opponent has to attack it with Siege Rhino a bunch of times, and that's a real ultimate at the end there. You know, you most of the time you can just ignore ultimates, but that's a real game-ending threat, a real clock for a control deck that doesn't have a lot of ways to end a game, especially control mirrors when you're both drawing a bunch of cards. That's a real good way to end a game. So I think that Nixilis Fuego, first of all, if it's Nixilis Fuego, Spanish copies are going to be like $100. You should go out and get them immediately.
Just like what happened with Sarkhan the Mad.
Exactly. Sarkhan El Locos are $75, even though that card's never seen any play anywhere. Right. But yeah, Nixilis I think can be real. I think that this guy could be another, like, one of the very few 5-mana planeswalkers that actually sees a lot of standard play.
And it could also be one of those 5-mana walkers that takes time to actually see that play because of the walkers that currently exist in Khans of Tarkir, or for whatever reason. Like, we see some of that a lot where it's like, wow, this planeswalker is awesome, but it took the first block to get out of the way before that person could actually shine. Desecration Demon was my spoiler for Return to Ravnica. Amazing card, but while Lingering Souls exists, not so amazing. As soon as Lingering Souls got out of the way, card was fantastic. So, Aaron, how do you feel about Nixilis, hopefully on Fuego?
Every time you say that, I keep imagining it with like the telenovela voice,
Hmm.
where and he's like "Yo soy of Nixilis" and just that kind
Draw the
of
little
dubbing.
pencil mustache on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I
Absolutely.
think he's totally viable. I know Ajani, Mentor of Heroes, saw play. Nissa Worldwaker certainly saw play. I don't rule a Planeswalker out solely because of the 5 mana cost.
Hmm.
I was more interested in Ob Nixilis from a Vorthos standpoint. Like, I was trying to figure out like what role he would play in the story. So I know that he had been, when we last left him, he had the Hedron removed because Jace had to put it in Garruk because Garruk lost his mind.
He was the
Hmm.
Fallen.
Right. So I was kind of wondering like what role Obnixilis was going to play in this. And I was actually kind of hoping that he would be like the anti-hero. I was thinking that he would fight alongside the other planeswalkers, not because he's a good person, but because he's
Hmm.
kind of stuck on this crappy realm too. And if it gets destroyed by the Eldrazi, well, that's not good for him either. So I was thinking maybe he would assist them in very selfish ways. But now that he has his planeswalker spark and he can sort of peace out, I'm not really sure what role he's going to play in everything. So I'm very interested to see in what he does in terms of the story. Like if he ends up, I certainly don't think he's going to work with the Eldrazi. Like I don't see Ulamog and him like communicating or anything.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll be like a thorn in their side, or maybe I don't know. But I'm really interested in him from a lore standpoint. Like I want to know what he does.
Sure. And speaking of sort of the lore stuff, today John Del Beatty wrote an article about Nissa, which was really
Really good.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, John Del A is a fantastic researcher. I know because he's helped me out with Forgotten Lore episodes, and I have him proofread all my Forgotten Lore stuff because he's deep in that stuff, and he's great. And he was basically pointing out that Nissa was kind of racist, and that's kind of a problem when we're trying to kind of get Magic's image into the mainstream and have them have this big movie and make sure all these guys are all like clean cut and awesome heroes. And when she's kind of like an evilish type character, which is what she began in Duels of the Planeswalkers, now they don't want her to be anymore, and now she's like, she's a good elf and she likes the elves and she's gonna save the world instead of
Sure.
being racist.
Well, people can learn, people can change, elves can learn, elves can change. It's a subject of elfin and human nature that they can become better, especially if they need to start selling movie tickets. I think that everyone who's a planeswalker would be a good person at heart is flawed logic. I think that
Yeah.
you
Well-
have to have even Liliana, who's like the villainess, right? That's what it anagrams to from Liliana Vest. She's villainous. But everyone was like, "Oh, she was protecting her brother. She's just sort of in a bad situation. It's the demons who are the bad guys."
Well-
You can't. From that perspective, I like that there are some bad guys that have this incredible power.
No, and there have to be. It's just that when these are the 5 like heroes of the set, these are the 5 main heroes of Magic. These are the 5 most lauded planeswalkers, and they are the good guys as is defined. They kind of had to retcon her image a little bit, which is fine. But let's keep talking about the second spoiler, which is, and I brought up on the screen here, Kiora, Master of the Depths. This card is absolutely fantastic. A lot of words, but I didn't read Ob Nixilis Reignited for those listening. It's 2 black, 3 colorless for a 5 loyalty, +1 draw a card, you lose life, -3 destroy target creature, -8 target opponent gets an emblem with whenever a player draws a card, you lose 2 life. So that's whenever they draw or you draw. Very, very good, as we've discussed. Kiora, Master of the Depths, is a Simic Planeswalker. This is green, blue, and 2 colorless, a 4 mana, 4 loyalty Planeswalker with +1 untap up to 1 target creature and up to 1 target land. -2, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a creature card and or a land card from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard, and -8, you get an emblem with whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may have it fight target creature, and then you put 3 8/8 blue octopus creature tokens onto the battlefield. Octofight. Fighting with octopuses. It's fantastic.
Octopuses.
Octopuses.
That's
And
24 arms coming at you.
yeah, she's got a bunch of abilities. Her +1 is very similar to kind of Garruk Wildspeaker, which untap 2 lands. This lets you untap a mana dork and a land, which is kind of, I think, the point there. Her -2 is very, very strong in a world with Delve, and that you can reveal 4 cards, get up to 2 of them. Also, remember that it will also take man lands. as well as just lands in general. So you could both get a creature and a man land, so you kind of got 2 creatures out of that deal. That's freaking fantastic. Cards in the graveyard, that's very good for recursive strategies like Death Mist Raptor, Den Protector. I mean, we're going to see a lot of that happening in a lot of those interactions where, oh great, now I can, I can Delvoy all this stuff because I've used her -2, which is drawing me cards while delving me cards away too. That's really, really good stuff. And -8 is just, I don't really think it's realistic, but it's just a great ability. It's just like some silly, crazy thing they came up with. Like, let's just make like octopuses and they just fight everybody.
Yeah, it's flavor text without being flavor text.
Yeah.
Right? It's like 100-handed one could block 99 additional creatures. No one's ever blocking 99 additional creatures.
But it sounds
if they
great.
could have instead blocked all additional creatures, but it's flavor text without being flavor text.
Yep.
Kiora is, like I was just mentioning with Ob Nicholas, usually the bar is...
Did you say Nicholas?
Ob Nicholas.
Ob Nicholas.
I was really hoping it was going to be Planeswalker-Ob instead of Planeswalker-Nicholas.
Nicholas?
But
That's a little weird.
It's a Nixilis. But for Kiora, you look at it and it replaces itself. Not only does it replace itself, but one activation of its -2 gives you 2 cards instead of 1.
Right.
So it's card advantage instead of just card replacement. It doesn't just cycle. Defending itself, it doesn't do so well. You need to have like a Sylvan Caryatid to untap, which we're not really going to have anymore. So that guy's in a tough spot, and there aren't any good mana elves anymore either. You've got
like
Terrible Hierarch, and that's
Rattleclaw Mystic.
Rattleclaw Mystic, I think, is going to be the premier of the format, but you do have Leaf Gilder.
Neither of those protect themselves very well. Those are 2/1s that you don't really want to be blocking creatures with.
Right. Well, you want to be preventing Kiora from dying is what you're doing at that point. You're not
I guess
so much
if you're ramping into Kiora on 3 and you're only once you get to the 4 mana mark, you just don't care anymore. Once you've ramped up to that number, then that's fine. You can throw away your Rattleclaw Mystics at that point. But I'd rather have bacon on my cheeseburger. I'd rather protect my mana elves and my Kiora. Yes, I went there. I am now Aaron Campbell.
Very nice. Very nice.
I want,
Aaron,
I like creatures. I want to keep my creatures in play.
Creatures are good. Aaron, what do you think about Kiora?
So the first thing I want to emphasize is that you only get the octopi,
yeah.
The octopi when you make the emblem. Some people thought that every time you fight, you get 3 octopi, and no, you get the emblem, then you get 3 octopi, then they can fight, and then you just get 3 octopi. So like you don't get you don't get more octopi unless you make another emblem.
Right, absolutely. Unless you activate that ability twice, sure.
No, yeah, there you go. So there was some confusion about that. I love Kiora. I think she's great in like a Super Friends kind of build. I actually played with her a little bit earlier in the season. I just love her. Like I love that she's sitting there with the Bident and she's like, "Sup, Thassa? Yeah, I got your Bident. What you gonna do about it, huh?" Like she's just got this look on her face. And I'm so happy that they resolved that plot line because you could see it in the flavor text that they didn't like each other. And when they finally released that Uncharted Realms where she stole the Bident, I lived, and I was so happy that they played that out. And I'm anxious to see what she does with that weapon, like how that plays into this. And somebody also talked about possibly now that the Bident isn't godlike anymore, like if there was a chance that could be like an equipment or something that like anybody could use. And I think that'd be cool too. Like I'm here for that.
That'd be sweet. So just kind of meta here for a second. I'm getting a lot of drop frames. So what I'm going to do is take down the stream and put the stream back up for just a moment, and maybe we'll be streaming somewhere else. I'm not turning off the local recording.
Okay.
So, all right, we're going back live again. Determining stream target server. Which would they like us to go to? It's Amsterdam time.
See,
streaming from Amsterdam.
The problem last time was we went to Frankfurt, and Frankfurt just doesn't have that Amsterdam
feel.
Let's call it a panache.
Called the panache. The Panashian. All right, so we're going to move on here to the Sam Blackiest card that I've seen in a long time, Smothering Abomination, which we do sometimes call the Sam Black Abomination because it is 2 black, 2 colorless for a 4/3 devoid, has no color, flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice a creature. All this sounds kind of, not great. But its last line is amazing. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, draw a card. No activation, no cost, no other words there. Whenever you sacrifice a creature, you draw a card. Whenever you sacrifice the new Eldrazi Scions, you draw a card. Whenever you use Nantuko Husk to eat tokens, because it doesn't say non-token creature, it says whenever you sack a creature, and that is one of the strongest abilities I've seen. Like, this is one of those, like, wizards. I feel this is one of those wizards, like, testing the waters. They're like,
Seeing
this
how far
ability
we
is
can push it.
bananas.
Yeah.
Yeah. But is it okay on a 4-mana creature? Go. Because creatures die. People have creature removal. Creatures are way more fragile than enchantments, because this could be a ridiculous enchantment. Thankfully, it's not. And yeah, they kind of put the pedal to the metal. So, Aaron, this card sounds like a card that you love right off the bat, wasn't it? You liked it as soon as you saw it.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, I realized it could never possibly work, but my first thought was immediately with Dredge, just to somehow like be able to like, I can sacrifice my Icarus.
To dredge off the draws.
Nice, nice.
You know, be like, all right, well, I have to sacrifice to Cabal Therapy anyway, so I sacrifice something, I get zombies from Bridge from Below, and I get to draw a card, which I can then, instead of drawing a card, I could dredge, and I'm just like, in a perfect world.
You're the only person on the planet who doesn't want to draw cards. Unbelievable.
I don't like it. Can I just put them here in this other place? Can I put them in the other place?
Great. No, I would rather not draw cards. I'd rather do this instead. But
no, I think this is great though. No, I do love the card though. I love that it's black. I love the sacrificing thing. I think I know the Aristocrats was a big hit when it was in Standard, and I think people were looking for, I know people kind of toyed with ways to like bring that back, and there was talk of like, I know people tried it with Immortal Servitude, that didn't work, and I think people are always looking for a reason to do crazy things with sack outlets, as we've seen with, you know, Rally the Ancestors, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people can do with this. I don't know what to do with it because I'm not a brewer, but I'd love to see what that card can do in the right hands, and especially around Pro Tour time. I'm definitely here for that. So
yeah. So to interject really quickly, Grim Haruspex is the card that the Rally of the Ancestors deck is running. It's from Cons, so it's still in Standard. However, its ability says whenever another non-token creature you control dies, draw a card. So this one, you have to sacrifice them. They don't have to just die. There's plenty of ways to sacrifice. Now there's ways to sacrifice for free. Ruben, do you think this card is just is it going to be a Standard player at this point?
You know, it's tough to say, because before we know what the whole set looks like, we don't know what the premier level elimination spell is going to be. For the last year or so, the premier toughness has been 5, because a lot of the spells that are able to kill things have given 4 damage or -4, -4, or have 4 power. Things like Siege Rhino, the tokens from Nissa, and particularly Stoke the Flames. If that switches down to 4 toughness with 3, or down to 3 toughness with 2, we could see this be more or less of a player. My issue with this card is that 3 has always been in kind of a weird spot, because most of the time there's something like Lightning Strike in the format.
Sure.
We don't actually have Lightning Strike in the format right now. We have Draconic Roar. But a lot of the premier level elimination spells are actually 2 damage. Things like Magma Spray and Wild Slash are actually 2 damage. So maybe this guy can stick around for a little bit longer. The other thing is, you know, the fact that this guy flies, he can avoid a lot of the combat that he doesn't want to impact, and the fact that you can drop him while your opponent's tapped out and then induce a combat later. Like, you have a bunch of your creatures in play already in something like mono black aggro, where you've already got, you know, a couple of your 2/1s for 1 black mana, and something like a Grim Haruspex already in play. Then you can do that. So I think that this guy has a chance to be really, really good.
Speaking of mono black aggro, you could possibly do something with Bloodsoaked Champion, because if you just sacrifice at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Bloodsoaked Champion, attack, bring Bloodsoaked Champion back with the raid trigger.
Sure.
Like
I
that.
mean, there's some shenanigans with that. Like, I could see that.
There are plenty of shenanigans going on. We're going to keep moving on, however, to more of our sweet spoilers. We're going to bring them up now. We're going to look at Desolation Twin, Bring to Light, and Roil Spout. So first, we're going to talk about Desolation Twin. It's a 10 mana 10/10. When you cast it, not even when it enters the battlefield, when you just cast it, put a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token onto the battlefield. And first of all, this is one of the clearest, most obvious Timmy cards I've ever seen. It speaks to me. I am a Timmy Spike, and oh my god, this card is awesome. It is huge. It's a huge monster. It makes a 10/10 token. We're gonna get a 10/10 token in packs. Yes.
Yeah.
I
Getting
can't
a 10/10
wait.
token in packs is nice.
Oh,
those
God.
are gonna be fun.
It's going to be great. And just look, a 10 mana 10/10, like 10 mana for two 10/10s, 20/20 worth of toughness and power. It's so wonderfully Timmy. I just love it to death. And Aaron, tell them what you think about this one.
I'm a big fan of things that things that happen even though someone counters it. So the fact that you give somebody the choice where you're like, all right, girl, you can counter this and just get a 10/10, or you could not counter this and get 20 power to deal with. And I'm all for that because I hate having my things countered. So it's nice to have that little insurance when, somebody's counterspell happy. It's like, no.
This is going to make some kid's day because no matter what happens, he gets his 10/10. No matter what, he either gets two of them or he gets one of them, and he's going to get 10 power and 10 toughness on the board. Regardless of what they think, regardless of what they do. Now, it may die soon thereafter, but
or
it's going to make
it. Or he could get stifled and then quit Magic.
I have to give a shout out
to stifle and quit.
I have to give a shout out to my friends on Magic the Amateuring because Maria said, I don't know if you saw this, Maria said that if you add an S to the end of that's what she describes her bosoms as, the Desolation Twins.
Nice. That's
love you, girls. I just had to say that.
So, Ruben, thoughts on your 10/10 that is unstoppable?
I was focused on something else. So this card is really weird to me because Timmy, because usually when you've got a giant monster like this, it's good in a reanimation deck, and this is not good in a reanimation deck at all.
Sure.
So it's kind of weird to me that this card exists because it only triggers when you cast it. So you can't put, for example, Splinter Twin on your Desolation Twin. That is actually it's not a non-bow. You still get another 10/10, but it's not as good as you might have hoped or expected.
Sure.
It's a good reward for getting up to 10 mana. I don't think it's going to see any play in any serious constructed formats, unfortunately, because casting a 10 mana spell. Usually you're trying to win with something that costs like 6.
There's definitely going to be some like crazy mono green ramp thing that's going to be all over F&M, and it's going to be great. But
sure,
I agree.
This?
Because my Timmy half is like flipping out over how awesome this card is, and the Spike half is like, dude, you know it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, Timmy half is like, this card is super well designed and I love it. Spike half is like, you don't want to open this ever.
No, it's not something you need or want. But I mean, I can imagine in sealed.
Card's sweet.
Yeah, with enough
sealed. Yeah,
with enough ramp, this card is like you will play this in sealed. There's so much ramp and so much mana available to you. All the scions, all that other stuff you'll want to. So that card is sweet. Let's move on to another sweet one, which is Bring to Light, a Simic spell, a green, a blue, and 3 colorless sorcery that has Converge. Now, the Converge counts the colors of mana which you use to play the spell. Converge, search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to cast Bring to Light. Exile that card, then shuffle your library. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. So every Johnny around the world, their head just went kapoo, because this sorcery for 5 mana can go and find and play a ridiculous amount of things. Now, let's just get this out of the way. It can't go find artifacts. It can't go find enchantments. It can't go find planeswalkers. But it can find creatures, instants, or sorceries. A lot of people were immediately thinking of the Time Spiral, Restore Balance, Wheel of Fate, as I recall, Living End.
Living End.
And Living End for the big one.
Also, too, wouldn't be bad.
Nice. And so you have the ability to go find these incredibly powerful things and just play them right off the bat, and allows a combo deck that originally could not play certain things. Living In could not use cards like Birds of Paradise in their deck because they might hit it off the cascade, and that's terrible. Well, you basically can just play this at any point in time, and all of a sudden your combo deck works, and it's great. This is a dangerous card. I think they priced it pretty well at 5 mana in terms of like, is this too good? Could we ever print something like this again? Well, the first time they're going to do something crazy like this card does, they're going to put it in the 5-6 mana range to make sure nothing too crazy happens. Ruben, tell me how you feel about this one.
Well, the other thing is that they specifically priced it at 5 so that you could pay Wooburg and go get your 5 mana sorceries if you wanted to.
Sure.
I think that this card is super interesting design space. Usually when you have a Simic card that puts a card into play or allows you to cast it for free, it's something like Unexpected Results, which is random, or it's Wargate. Wargate actually saw a decent amount of standard play and a little bit of modern play for like 2 weeks. But it was super expensive and super cost prohibitive and didn't really let you do all the things you really wanted to. This is the closest that we've come to one of these super crazy search your library and do something crazy spells. I think that the way to go is definitely the free spells. I think that you were onto something with Restore Balance on that one, because you can suspend the Gargadon on the turn before you cast this, get the Restore Balance, cast it for free, get it and get your combo going all together like that. That deck was already playing these 3 colors, so I think that that's a pretty cool thing that you can do with Bring to Light. I'm not as high on it as you guys are, though. I think that this is a lot of moving parts, and that they did cost it quite not really very aggressively. They were pretty safe with the casting cost in order for this to see any serious play in any of the older formats.
They want to keep spells bad, or not bad, just worse than creatures more or less most of the time. They can defend this easily by saying, well, we want to give you the ability to play Wooburg for all the convergence, so that's why we priced it at 5, when I think in actuality, if this thing was just like green-blue, it would be completely insanely busted. But they knew there's a line between green-blue, which is busted, and 5 mana, which is probably a little too far, but you can find a happy medium.
Yeah, and this also goes into your like Court of Calling kind of decks, where you have like Collected Company, where you used to have Collected Company and Court of Calling, now you have Collected Company in this thing, and then the rest of your cards are all creatures. You can just go tutor for Shaman of the Pack or whatever it is you're getting in Collected Company these days.
Nice.
So I think that this card has some applications.
Aaron, how do you feel about it?
Did you say Shaman?
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 I'm a shamaner. I'm not a shamaner. I'm a shaman.
I like Bring to Light. As somebody who's played Living End for a while, I think there's a lot of potential there. I think it would occupy the same space as Kiki Jiki did in the Splinter Twin decks for a while, where you certainly wouldn't max out on it, but you wouldn't mind, like Kiki Jiki was like Splinter Twin number 5 or Splinter Twin number 6, just in case you couldn't get your copies of Splinter Twin, you'd have this backup plan. I think Bring to Light is kind of in the same space. You wouldn't want to have 4 of these in a Living End deck, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to. I know I've had issues with Demonic Dread, where sometimes you don't have a creature to target your Demonic Dread with, and having a dead Demonic Dread is no fun, but having this be, the 9th way to get your Living End, or like your 5th Living End, I think this is really cool. I also like it in Ad Nauseam. I certainly, again, wouldn't have maybe more than 1, but we have run Mystical Teachings to try to find the card that costs 4. Sometimes it's nice to get your Pact of Negation if you think there's a counterspell coming. You want to be able to fetch a 0 counterspell and be ready for this. The 2 things I like about this card is you don't have to reveal the card. You just get to search for it and exile it, so I don't think you have to reveal it.
Well, you have to reveal it when you put it off to the side.
Well, yeah, when it goes to the exile zone, that has to be face up. It also has to show, and it also has to show that it's a creature, instant, or sorcery.
Got it.
Which is why it doesn't necessarily say reveal it, because the exile zone.
Your hand, of course.
Yeah, the exile zone is revealed.
Do you know if you have to use it on that turn? Like, so it says you may cast this card without paying its cost. Does it mean you have to use it right now?
I think that you have to use it right then. I don't think that there's a delayed. There's not like a spelljack clause.
Sure.
It says at any time.
Based on my reading of it, search your library for a creature, instant, or sorcery card, and convert a mana cost less than or equal to the number of colors of mana spent to play it. Exile that card, then shuffle your library. Okay, so now it's exiled, you shuffled. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. It does not say until end of turn, which is usually the key, or this turn, which is also the thing, which is also a key. So to me, again, I would love to ask the judges out there in the world to tell me this is true, but I'm pretty sure you can hold and keep that card in exile waiting to be cast.
If you can do that, jeez, this is way more powerful than I thought.
This is super good.
Especially for those combo decks where, like, a lot of people, especially with Ad Nauseam, you want to find the right window to go off, and, if they just happen to have their pants down, so to speak, and you have that one card in exile, and you can do your thing.
You can just bring to light, like, Pact of Negation, and just be like, go.
Yeah, it's just sitting off to the side. Yeah, and the other thing that actually kind of makes sense a little bit with some of the mechanics in the set. In for example, there's a card we were talking about, which is 2 colorless black blue. you have to put 2 cards from your opponent's exile zone into their graveyard to counter a spell.
Right.
So you could pull their Bring to Lighted spell back
Yeah.
into the graveyard, for example.
Yeah.
That might make sense, actually. So maybe it is that reading. And if that's the case, I am way higher on this card than I was originally. I thought you just had to cast it the turn that you did it.
I don't think so, and I think that's super sweet. So yeah, this card, yeah,
I'm pretty sure it just means now. I'm pretty sure. Like, I'm 90% sure that it just means you have to cast it now.
Even then, I wouldn't kick it out of my bed for eating Cheetos. I'd be fine with that.
Card's
this
sweet.
card is still pretty good. I mean, I would pay retail for Living Death, and that's what you would be doing if you're playing Bathe in Light or Bring to Light for Living End. So it's a perfectly reasonable card.
All right, so I'm going to ask Twitter. I'm going to ask Mr. Tabak, who is the actual writer of the rules.
In the middle of our live show?
Absolutely, that's what I do. But because by the time I come back to this, I'm going to have the answer from like 40 people who automatically know this, and they're like level 2s and all this other stuff. MTG BFZ, yo. All right.
Live television.
Live television is happening right now. We're going to keep going. We are talking about Roil Spout. Now, this one is a very, very good card. It's a blue and a colorless and a white. I'm sorry, a blue, white, and a colorless. So 3-mana sorcery. It puts target creature on top of its owner's library. Note that it says creature. Note that it does not say non-land creature. Just says creature. However, it has Awaken 4, because why not? For a blue, a white, and 4 colorless, for 6 mana, you can both put target creature on top of its owner's library and turn one of your lands into a 4/4, as it has Awaken 4. That is a hell of a Magic card. Now, I will note, it's been rumored, not been confirmed, there's an Awaken counterspell.
Yes.
For 2 blue and a colorless, it's a cancel. However, this one has 2 blue and 4 colorless, cancel target spell, and make a 3/3. So for 3 mana, you counterspell. For 6 mana, you counterspell and get a 3/3 land out of it. Again, that's been rumored. I wouldn't be really surprised, but they seem to be really pushing these Awaken cards for control decks, for slow mid-range decks, to allow them to have a card that's good early, a card that's good late, and that's the definition of a great Magic card, at least in my experience. So, Ruben, how did you feel about this one, Roil Spout?
Boy, Time Ebb is a serviceable Magic card.
Yeah.
Time Ebb has been playable since it was first printed in Portal. Time Ebbs are great. Return to the Ether was a defensible first pickable card in the most recent limited format. Most recent in Origins.
Sure.
And this is just a spectacular card, I think, especially if the control decks and the slow mid-range decks, as you were talking about, are using Awaken as their main win condition. Probably things like Awakened lands and Planeswalkers are their main win conditions, not trying to get things like dragons into their deck anymore. Roil Spout becomes that much better because not only have you tempoed them out by putting their creature on top, the creature you've put on top is a dead draw for them the next turn. That's a land that you've then turned back into only a land. It's no longer a creature.
Right.
And so in Awaken Mirrors, this card is insanely powerful. I really like this card a lot. And I think that this is the card that we've discussed. It might be not the most exciting card that we've talked about today, but it's certainly the one that I think has the most potential for seeing standard play.
Beyond the Planeswalkers we talked about?
Well, but beyond the Planeswalkers.
Yeah, beyond the Planeswalkers. Okay, sure. Well, the internet has
I think
spoken.
It's possible that this is going to see as much play as some of the Planeswalkers, though. This card's really good.
It is a spectacular card, and in blue-white control, I would not be surprised at all. However, the internet has spoken, and Bring the Light, you were correct, Ruben. It is part of the spell's resolution to choose whether or not to play it right now. So you have to do it immediately. So you can't just get the Pact of Negation. Yeah, it's still a really great card, does a really bunch of really cool stuff, but you can't go get your Pact Negation, say go get your second Pact Negation, say go, and whatever. So and I don't think you really want to live in that world. Of course, as a Spike, you're like, yes, I can do broken, unfair things that make my opponent feel horrible. But that's not really the magic we need. It's the magic we deserve. Aaron, how do you feel? How do you feel
I'm
about
still back
Roil
on the
Spout?
2-pact of negation. Like you had me there for a minute. Like
I'm so excited.
Yes.
Oh my god!
I've done that before too, where they counter it and you're like pact, and then like they counter it again pact, I got 2 more. Like,
Could do this
Moving
all
on.
day.
Moving on. I
All
agree
right.
with Ruben. I agree with what he said. As I've said before, I think Awaken is great for control decks. I think part of the problem with the control decks that we currently have is they have a lot of answers and no way to close out the game. So having these spells that do the things that a control deck would normally do, but still give you the option as possibly another win condition to make these 4/4 creatures or however big Awaken can be when people are already boarding out their removal because they think you're a control deck. Surprise! Suddenly you're making 4/4s. So I think it gives control decks a new angle that they desperately need. As somebody who hates facing control decks in the standard environment, I'm all for this. So I hope I see this.
Oh yeah, they're
and,
getting
by
some
the
serious
way-
tools.
Oh, by the way, this doesn't have to be only a control card. Time Ebbs
I
have
know.
mostly been powerful in tempo aggro decks.
Sure.
You go Kytheon into 2-drop anything into Roil Spout. And then also, once you're getting mana flooded and kind of behind on the board, you can get rid of their big dragon and make a 4/4 afterwards. This is a real player in not just control decks.
Oh, for sure. I was just going from what I've seen, the decks that I think could really use it.
Oh, sure.
And I think primarily it would see play there, but I could absolutely see J-Sky using this. I think what you said was a great example. I definitely think there are other uses.
Yeah,
I'm just tired of losing to these control decks that can't beat me. We're like,
Oh, man. You just referenced. I forgot that Jeskai Ascendancy can untap all your Awaken lands.
yeah.
Yeah, that's the
dear.
thing. Yeah, it's gonna be super fair. So we're gonna move on to our last new spoilers. We kind of have to go retread some stuff from last week for a bit, but first I want to talk about, or lastly for our new spoilers, I want to talk about Lumbering Falls. I want to talk about the enemy manlands, which have been revealed to be split between the two sets. Now we haven't been told how many are in Battle for Zendikar and how many are for Oath of the Gatewatch. But we do have Lumbering Falls in front of us, and it is so good. These are rare lands that enter the battlefield tapped. They tap for 2 different colors of mana, so it's a dual land. This is the green-blue. They're all enemy colors, so it's going to be red-white. It's going to be black-white. I can't wait for the Orzhov land. I hope it's super good. But they've all been spectacular. So like Stirring Wildwood, if Stirring Wildwood is your floor, these cards are awesome. Lumbering Falls in particular, for a blue, green, and 2 colorless, becomes a 3/3 green and blue elemental with hexproof until end of turn. It's still a land. Now, this was mentioned a little bit today by Chapin in his premium article, and what he pointed out, which I thought was really spot on, is that when you're in this world where you're playing like a control deck versus a control deck, you want to have things that kind of trump their end game. And so when you're a control deck and you're drawing all these crazy cards, maybe you got Ob Nixilis going, and maybe they're drawing cards with their own stuff, and stuff is going, and everyone's using removal, and everything's dying, and nothing can stay on the board, and then all of a sudden you got this 3/3 hexproof that just kind of kills them. So it's sort of like a Nimble Mongoose-esque, like, okay, we've reached the stage of the game where we both have a bunch of removal spells in our hand, except I have the hexproof creature that was also a mana source for me, and I'm going to kill you with it. And so it will either bounce off your Lumbering Falls, or I will figure out, or I'll just kill you with this hexproof dude. So these cards, the original manlands were the allied colored lands. And they were spectacular. They were absolutely amazing. They were all over standard. Raging Ravine continues to be a top tier land in the modern format, and probably will
Don't
for
forget Treetop Village.
Treetop Village,
sure.
yes. But I'm talking about the original 5 allied manlands from World.
Yeah, the allied, the 2-color manlands.
The 2
Stirring
color,
Wildwood.
the dual
Original
color.
ones from,
Stirring Wildwood was not that good. However, Creeping Tar Pit was absolutely amazing. Stirring Wildwood just wasn't. It was fine. It just wasn't that
played
good.
It in Legacy. I played it in I played it as a 1-of in Maverick to go get with my Knight of the
Thank
Reliquary.
you.
Fair
As
enough.
the worst of the 5, if that's the worst,
Yeah.
boy.
See?
The Creeping Tar Pit's seen play as a finisher in multiple
Yeah.
old, like modern and extended and legacy decks.
Mm-hmm.
Celestial Colonnade is a huge powerhouse in modern.
Yeah.
If Stirring Wildwood is your floor, boy, these are tough to beat.
Okay, before the internet gets mad at me, Lava Claw Reaches was the floor.
Okay, Lava Claw Reaches.
Lava Claw Reaches was not good because
it's not great.
2 toughness and whatever. It's fine. But even that saw play. Even that saw plenty of standard play as like a 2-of, and Ravaging Ravine got a 4-of in the Jund deck, and Jund started playing 27, 28 lands, because who cares? Your lands are your spells. The cards that make sure your mana works and your spells can be played are also your your creatures in the late game, and that is so incredibly powerful. Wizards has given us another huge gift with these things, and just, do not underestimate the power of these lands. They are going to be everywhere in Standard, and I'm really hoping, as I did today on Twitter, I'm hoping that the red-white one is ridiculous. I hope it's banana, because I want it to be like red-white, it becomes a 2/2 double strike. Like, yeah.
I was thinking like 4/1 first strike. I thought that's where you were going.
I want the double strike. I mean, it might be red, white, and a colorless.
Would be nice.
Red, white, and a colorless 2/2 double strike could still work. It's not quite as good, but it's still what you want to do. You don't want to put too much mana in your red, white aggro deck. Speaking of, another thing I noticed. What is up with no aggro cards being spoiled yet? All we got are these huge, ridiculous cards that cost 1 million mana.
They're waiting for Mox Ruby Week.
Yep. All right, but let's
bring them all out for one big show where I love every card that they're like, hey, all the 1-drops in the format. Hey, all your stupid control cards. Look at you with your adorable 5-mana Planeswalkers. Kill you before turn 3.
I certainly expect to see a Lightning Strike in Battle for Zendikar. I don't think we're going to be without a 3-mana deal 3 damage, or 2-mana deal 3 damage. Aaron, how do you feel about the manlands coming back, the Lumbering Falls in particular? What do you think?
I'm excited about it. I was somebody who played Black-Green Rock in Standard, and so I had Mutavault, and Mutavault was one of those cards that I didn't think I would miss until it was gone. Like, Mutavault was my first experience with manlands. I hadn't played Modern yet. I certainly hadn't played Legacy, so Mutavault was sort of my introduction to manlands. And I remember, Supreme Verdict didn't work against Mutavault and things like that, and Mutilate didn't work against Mutavault, and all those spells that were the removal spells of the time. And so when I think about this, I think about going back to that era, and now that I have played Modern and I have experienced cards like Raging Ravine and Stirring Wildwood, I'm looking forward to this. I think this is something we've needed, and the fact that it's hexproof is great, and I'm excited about this. I'm just excited to see other colors. Like, I'm so sick of Abzan, so if this means that, like, Bug could experience a resurgence, or if even Teamer could become a thing, if this could help that, I'm all for that. I'm just sick of looking at the same 3 colors.
Lumbering Falls in particular, because of Kiora, is an interesting one, because Kiora goes and finds this card. As we mentioned when we were talking about Kiora, it finds a land and a creature, and this is a land that's also a creature, so you get double the pleasure. I think that this one also, there's been a lot of talk in the competitive community about how they hate hexproof as a mechanic and would rather just have Shroud. This is the kind of hexproof you want. It's a really good way to end games. It's not too powerful, but it's just powerful enough. I really like it a lot.
Yeah, I don't mind this as hexproof because I think to go off on a tangent, I think hexproof is only problematic when people suit things up. I don't see people slapping a Daybreak Coronet on this thing, so I'm not too worried about it.
Right.
I think it's when you take an innocent little 1/1 and suddenly it's a 15/16 Vigilance, Lifelink, Trample, then we've got a little out of control. But this, I'm okay with it.
As long as the blue-red manland doesn't gain haste.
The blue-red one, I'm just expecting to be a looter. Like, I'm just expecting like a 2/1 flyer that loots for like 3 mana. Red, blue, and colorless.
They always give the blue-red and the black-green ones the worst ones.
Yeah.
Like, Grim Backwoods was so bad in that cycle from Innistrad. Desolate Lighthouse was pretty good, but that cycle, they're probably just going to give black-green like a 1/3 Death Toucher or something horrible.
Like Golgari Char or Golgari Keystone or whatever.
Yeah, like a 2/2 Death Touch or something.
Yeah, they'll screw over black-green just because Abzan's already so good. They don't need another thing. Yeah. And then Abzan will just still use it because who wouldn't want another creature in there?
Because it's just going to be a free creature that fixes your mana. It's unbelievable. These cards are so good. All right, so we're going to move on from our new spoilers. We're going to go into Gathering the Townsfolk. We're going to talk about what everybody was talking about this week, which turns out to be what we're calling the Battle for Zendikar Dual Lands. Now, we spoke about this a little bit last week, and we talked about being on Team Tango, and then the whole internet just lost their minds. Yeah. Because, oh my god, we can't call them this thing that is kind of in-jokey, but is a lot more fun than Number Lands or Count Lands or Buddy Lands or whatever it is that was monikered about. And now it's like, well, we're just going to call them Battle Lands, and that's fine. People were getting like really upset at me and like super like venomous about like, this is not what it's supposed to be in our game. Is like, dude, it's just cool. It's cool. It doesn't matter what you call them. I called them that because I liked it. I thought it was a fun name.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to define anything for everybody.
Sure, but as some folks who have a little bit of pull within the community and have shaped a little bit of the nomenclature of the cards that we've talked about. Hashtag 3Dudes Seriously, for example. I think that there's a little bit. This is the place. This is where we can hash it out. And I like that we had the discussion last week. I was the one arguing against Tango Lands last week.
Sure.
I was the one who was like, all right, guys, this is adorable, but we can't with the Tango. And then social media kind of lost their minds this week a little bit. Like, there were pros that just came out of the woodwork and were just like, if they call them Tango Lands, I'm throwing my collection away and moving to Canada. Like, what's the problem? Like,
dude, this is not, a hill you need to die on. It's just a silly nickname.
Now, I saw some tweets from, I think Aaron Forsyth was the one that tweeted that they didn't call the Ravnica duels Shocklands. They called them Rav duels.
Right.
And these would be battle duels or Zen duels or something like that.
Sure.
And so if that's the, official nickname, if there's such thing as an official nickname, I'm fine with that. I'm also fine with, people calling them whatever they want to call them. It just so happens that Shocklands stuck. But if you haven't played Magic in the last 6 years, you don't know what Shock does. You probably don't know what Shocklands means. Unless someone was like, at FNM was like, well, this is why they're called Shocklands. Long ago, before they decided that Lightning Bolt was okay to reprint in Standard, they thought Lightning Bolt was way too good, so they printed Shock. And Shock was a really bad Wild Slash, and they've printed every card better than Shock since then. But it's it's okay. I'm fine with people who call them Tango Lands. I'm fine with it. I'm not in love with it. I think that them being dual lands means that we can do something with the dual aspect.
Sure.
Like new duels would be fine with me. Tap duels.
I mean, Zen duels.
Basic duels.
Whatever.
Zen duels. Whatever. So, but it's going to happen organically. We don't have to come to a decision.
Right. So, Aaron, how do you feel about this controversy?
I think it's deeply silly. I actually blocked a couple of people over this because they popped off at me on Twitter, and I don't stand for that. I just don't understand what the fuss is about. Like, spoiler season is the one time of year where I am at my most optimistic. I'm at my most positive. Whenever I see a new card, I immediately try to think of ways that I can use it. My first response isn't to crap on something. So, when you said that, the Tango thing, I didn't see a problem with that. I'm like, all right, I'm cool with that. I'm fine with Buddy Land, I'm fine with Zen Land. I just didn't understand what the fuss was about. Whereas, like, if it, and frankly, if it's not this, then it's what you're going to talk about next. But I'm just seeing a lot of complaining regarding this set, and that's a bit of a buzzkill.
Magic players, we got to do something, man.
We got to.
Saying though, but I think most of the kerfuffle was going on yesterday, and I didn't even go to my homepage because I just thought it was just deeply silly, and I just don't understand what the big deal is. Like, you can call it this, and I can call it this, and why? What does it matter? Why do you care?
I do think Battle Lands is worse. I do think that Battle Lands.
I think Battle Lands is bad. Mainly, and it's just like, guys, the other lands are coming out in Oath. So, like, what, you gonna call those the Oath lands? Now we got the Battle Lands and the Oath lands?
Battle Lands kind of reminds me of, like, this is a bit of a stretch here, but, like, no. When you go to the grocery store and, like, the names they come up with for the bagged cereals that are not the name brand cereals, that's kind of like what Battle Lands reminds me of. Like, this is the generic
Crunchy
cereal.
Yeah,
right. It's like, you couldn't come up with anything better, so here's the bagged cereal name for these lands. Like, girl, bye. Like,
Honey Nut Toasters.
Right.
The best alternative name that I saw on Twitter, since we are gathering the townsfolk and talking about Twitter, was Santa Lands. Did you guys see this one?
What?
Because they checked twice.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Let's just run back. One of my employees, Jeremy, was like, we'll just call them Drunk Lands because it takes two buddies to stand up.
Now,
I mean, like,
I like Drunk Lands. That's good too.
See?
Probably not the image the
see,
Wizards want.
it's not what we want for our game to start with, but it's just,
They're
gonna end up being
It's
Zen
silly.
Lands. There's too much
just-
disagreement.
I just see
Yeah.
Zen Duals.
I'm fine
and
either way.
Zen Duals is fine for me. I don't care. Again, this is one of those, like, you know what? I'm just going to step back and not try to look like I'm trying to define anything, rather than just say, I thought it was the funnest, best name that had been come up with, so whatever.
This reminds me a lot of the deck list naming convention argument that was big for like a month last year.
It's still
It's still kind of a big thing.
A little bit.
It really came to a head last spring-ish.
It's about affinity and robots.
Yeah, affinity and robots, and then we just couldn't define what control meant, and we just didn't want, like, half the folks just didn't want mid-range to be a name for anything.
Well, we
Just
also
'cause
saw this.
if
with
everything's
the-
mid-range, then nothing is mid-range, you know?
We also
It's
saw
like
this
that.
with the clans a little bit. Like, look at all those people who were like, "I'm not calling it Sultai Nova, and you can't make me." And now here we are 6 months later, and they're saying Sultai, and they're saying Jeskai, and they're saying Abzan, and now what?
That's right. They lost that battle. So
Right?
either way,
We'll see
it's
how it
kind of
shakes
silly. I'm excited to to tango onward into the splash damage. You saw what I did there, Ruben.
I saw it, and I
It takes two.
approved on
Takes
some
you
level,
guys.
but I also
You guys.
hate you.
No, you don't. Now, we're going to have the Hearthstone World Championships under the microscope. Now, the World Championships for Hearthstone are kind of weird. Now, if you're deep into Magic, if you understand Magic, particularly tournament Magic, and you understand sort of the way that you get to the Pro Tour, and you have the Open Series, go to the Invitational, and you have PPTQs, which leads to your Regional PTQ, which goes to your Pro Tour and stuff, those are all very standard straight lines for how to play in the biggest event of the year, or the biggest events in the year when it comes to Pro Tours, the biggest event when it comes to World Championships. So when you get to Hearthstone and it's like there's all these different types of tournaments that give you all these different like bonus point things, and some of them are invite tournaments, so they invite like super huge streamers who have to play against a very small number of people to get a very large number of points. And then you have these other tournaments that you have, like 1,000 people in them, and you have to beat 1,000 people versus, just 20 or 30 or however many are in the smaller tournaments. You have these varying levels. You have nothing's on a really level playing field at this point. And you have a game that wasn't really designed to be competitive, that is turning competitive and is growing a really great competitive scene. I actually really, I'm really like sort of watching Hearthstone blossom into this like tournament kind of powerhouse. If they can get OP down, if they can figure out and stop doing all this stupid crap, Hearthstone is going to get for real serious. It's not going to take too many more sets or too many more sort of advancements in its mechanics and its card pool before you start to see like it's going to start really leeching away more and more Magic players. I know I play my fair share of Hearthstone, and Ruben, I know you do as well. And if their OP can get straight, it's going to be an incredible, incredible thing. But as of right now, it's kind of been, you've seen more as favoritism and messing people over when they're trying to do and can jump through all these hoops. And Ruben, can you kind of further this on with talking a little bit about Pro Tour champion Stanislav Sivka and his quest to get to this World Championships and where he actually did not?
Right. So basically, to help translate this for Magic players, the punchline a lot of the times when it comes to Magic is like, Magic's great except for this one thing. That our punchline tends to be Magic Online. Mm-hmm. Hearthstone's punchline tends to be their organized play department. Mm-hmm. Because to say that they have an organized play department would be giving them too much credit. They don't have an organized play department. They sort of just lease out the name Blizzard Hearthstone tournament to whoever comes up with $10. Basically, is what it is. And it's constantly being made fun of by people like Nidra, who's basically the guy for news in Hearthstone. He writes for a website called Gosu Gamers.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Nidra? I think it's Nidra, Nydra. I don't know how.
I would say Nidra, but I don't know.
Hail Nidra. But this really came to a head because one of the biggest names in European Hearthstone, on the EU server as it's known, is a name that Magic players will be familiar with, Pro Tour champion Stanislav Sivka, who plays under the name Stan Sivka online. A lot of the Magic players are not real good at coming up with new names for their Hearthstone thing. Like Stan Sivka and Kibler and Reignited, which is just his first name rearranging the letters.
Nice.
They aren't the most creative when it comes to naming, but as opposed to people like Firebat, who have much more Anyway, well, moving on from that. So Stan sort of had an awful experience, and as being one of the premier level players in Europe, you don't want a name as big as Stanislav Sivka coming after you with something as bad as this, because he's been trying to make professional Hearthstone a thing that he does. He's gone to a lot of the tournaments. He went to the China versus the World tournament that happened about 6 months ago. He was in the Star Ladder tournament that happened last weekend. He's been trying to collect these points, as you were mentioning. And first of all, finding tournaments and when they occur, if you ask a pro player who's playing in these and getting invited, how did you find out about this tournament? Well, I was invited personally. Well, how did you get invited? Well, I played in this tournament. How did you find out about that tournament? Someone at Blizzard messaged me and told me to play in this tournament that I didn't even know was happening. I've heard that that's the story for like 5 or 6 different people.
Wow.
There just isn't a centralized database
Yeah.
to find when Hearthstone tournaments are going on.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that the Hearthstone tournaments that are going on are kind of still in this backwoodsy Wild West phase of people, this tournament is run in this fashion, and this tournament is run slightly differently. And
This is what happens when you don't have a DCI.
Exactly.
We are
And
literally
so,
seeing what happens when you don't have it.
I think that to say that they weren't expecting a competitive environment in Hearthstone is, I don't buy it, because you look
Really?
at Blizzard, and everything that Blizzard's ever done has had a competitive environment, even WoW, which is like not a thing that you can even have a tournament about. Aaron knows a lot that there were these teams that would come together and try to be elite teams in the world, even though there weren't quote unquote tournaments for that happening.
Well,
And
they
then you also
certainly
look at
understand
another-
StarCraft, right? Like,
Right. Well, StarCraft is a game that now there's not one but 2 channels devoted to StarCraft competitive play in Korea.
wow.
The television program channels, not Twitch, not this internet crap. Actual TVs with actual remote controls. People can turn the channel and watch StarCraft on their television sets.
Wow.
So, and then you look at a game like Super Smash Brothers, which was another game that people were like, yeah, they're just going to have Mario punching Link in the face. Isn't that adorable? They'll never make a tournament scene. 5 years later, 10 years later, there's huge tournaments with Super Smash Brothers and Melee and Brawl and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure I buy the fact that they didn't think that there was going to be a competitive scene. But let's work on the assumption that they weren't expecting their game that turned out to be super popular to be super popular. Let's work on that assumption for just a moment. The fact that it's taking them so long to develop a competitive scene is not good. I don't have a ton of hope that it's going to get fixed in the near future if they haven't fixed it yet. It's really complicated to get into tournaments. I know I'm not very good at getting into the tournaments, even though I've played a lot of Hearthstone. And the myriad of different paths to get in are it's just awkward. You have one event that's like ESL Katowice or whatever. Was a single elimination tournament where some people get buys and some people don't. Well, how's that fair? In a single elimination tournament, you have a 1,000-person tournament,
Aaron.
and some people get buys and some people don't. So, and that's only one tournament of like 6 different types.
Okay, so I'm trying to compare this to Magic because I'm not fluent in Hearthstone, so maybe you can answer
Sure.
me a quick question. So, are there things like Planeswalker points or Pro points where, like, even if let's say you go to a GP and there's even though, like, let's say I go 6-3, I get Planeswalker points just for participating. If I top so much, I get Pro points, and then
Yes.
those can be spent on things. Is that a thing in Hearthstone?
Sort of, yes. As
Okay.
opposed to there being tournaments, you have what's called the ladder, which means that instead of it being a tournament, a weekend, you have competitive play all month long that you can just play on your
Because I'm seeing
computer at any time.
HWC points being mentioned. What are those?
Right, and that's the sort of the pro points or the world championship points, and you have
Those are world championship
and
points. Those
different-
are slightly different than the ladder.
right, and
Okay.
different tournaments based on their size give out different numbers of points. So if it's a $10,000 tournament, it gives out these many points, and it's a $25,000 tournament, it gives out those points. But when you have no governing tournament body, just kind of like whoever Blizzard talks to, whenever they kind of get those conversations started, that's great. I, for one, feel like you're not going to see anything happen until they get past the first World Championships, no matter what. Like, they screwed it up. I think it's pretty obvious. Some of the flaws are pretty glaring. And I think if they hire the right people, you get past this first awkward season, and then you get people in there who establish what needs to happen and have some sort of governing body as to how these things work. Turn off the special invites, the special kind of like, hint, hint, nudge, nudge to the huge streamers who get invited everything, so they get so many opportunities for points and things. And you kind of get back to that even playing field. You get a Swiss system. For God's sakes, get a Swiss system. Because that's kind of silly. And, and I think you kind of see them really, like, again, Hearthstone gets their stuff together, it's going to be quite the force.
Yeah, as soon as they figure out all this stuff. This was last year they had a World Championships, but it was like they didn't really have a qualifying system for it. It was just whoever did well in the big tournaments that happened to be going on.
Sure.
This year there's going to be, at BlizzCon, there's going to be a qualifying system, and it'll be slightly more improved. Next year it'll be more improved. It's a young game. They've got lots of time, and there's lots of attention and money being poured into it. So I'm sure they're actually going to fix it fairly quickly. It just so happens that it's just a gosh darn mess right now.
It's
too bad.
It's darn tootin'. So we're running out of time.
Listen, make fun of my words.
Hey, I'll do it. I'll do it again. Darn tootin'. I'm gonna quickly pass the salt. I'm going to quickly pass the salt. I want to bring up on the screen right now the Expedition lands. Now these are the new ones that's been revealed this past week, and holy cow, Noah Bradley, you're such a freaking master. The Godless Shrine is so sweet. I absolutely love it. I am not the biggest fan of Sacred Foundry, but I don't really get like the total sort of weird hate and dislike that people don't like this one almost as much as they liked Godless Shrine, which is weird. And today, on the right side of your screen, you can see Flooded Strand. Flooded Strand, if you're just listening to us, it's the most amazing looking waterfall with these blues and purples, and the color is brilliant and it's wonderful. And then about a third of it is covered up with a text box. A big old text box that has a big sort of a clear, an opacity that you can see clear through the background, but it is still covering up the art, and it has all the words for the land on it. And if you're not going to give me a full textless frame, we're talking like cryptic command, just nothing but the words cryptic command and a cool picture. If you're not going to do that for me, then please get rid of this background. Get rid of this text box and just have the words on there, because you're covering up this amazing artwork that you hired these guys who are some of the best at what they're doing right now, and it's really obvious. You said, you know what, guys, like, we're going to cover up a big bunch of it, even though it's absolutely brilliant and it's going to be some of the most wanted and desired cards that is going to make people flip out when they open these things. And, Wizards, you got to meet me halfway. They got to meet me halfway. They gotta get rid of that text box and keep their words if they want their words.
Yeah. But
you can't cover up that amazing artwork like this in the future, please.
Yeah, words are stupid. I actually agree with you on this past assault. I know it's kind of like a point that's weird to belabor, but if you're going to print a textless cryptic command, that card has so many words on it. And everybody, not everybody, but if you know what cryptic command does, you know what the fetch lands do, you know what the shock lands do, you know what the Tango lands do.
Nice.
You know what these cards do. And not only that, you've hired these guys to create these really iconic pieces that are going to be foil copies. Are going to be like $500 for some of these lands, and so it's going to be very difficult to get your hands on some of these. And you cover up a third of it with text box, which is I don't like it so much.
Yeah.
These are not for casual players anyway. They might have one in their binder. Just as something that they hold as their like the central piece of their collection. Sure. But they're not going to collect a whole bunch of them and put them in a deck together, most likely. The people that know what the cards do. And I think that's the big thing, is that you're playing to two audiences that you don't need to be playing to here.
So, and one last thing I want to kind of touch on here. I was talking to a guy on Twitter, and he was like, man, I can't believe they put the Expedition lands in there. I want them so bad. I guess I'm going to have to buy 2 cases. And I'm like, that was almost zen. And he's just like, dang it, I like them so much, I'm going to have to buy more Magic cards. And Wizards is just like, yep. Yes, this is exactly what we wanted to happen.
We did it, everybody.
And not only that are these lands going to be amazing. They're going to be worth an absolute ton of money. They are going to help out all of the Magic players, because when everybody buys the packs and everybody's opening all the rares all the time, that's why Siege Rhino, the best creature in Standard, arguably one of the best creatures in Modern, sees as a 4 of and a ton of different types of decks, is like less than $5. There's a reason for that, because infinite people opened cons for all of those fetch lands. Infinite people are going to buy Battle for Zendikar boxes for these Expedition lands, which is going to depress the price of all of those rares that make up your deck. So it's going to make your decks cheaper. It's going to give you these incredible experiences when you open one of these things, and it's just this cool special thing they get to do. So I think once Wizard sees the unbelievable sales numbers that these things are going to drive, I 100% believe they're going to do this every set, as I mentioned previously, because holy cow. All right, so
Also, real briefly, I'm not as huge a fan of the Flooded Strand as everybody else seems to be. It's a very unpopular opinion. I like it, and the foils are going to be super pretty, but it's neither flooded nor a strand, right? What's the deal with grape nuts? But no, really, this is like it's just like a bunch of the Cup Islands from the first Zendikar, right?
I think it's definitely flooded. I don't know how strandish it is, but it's a flood where there's just water everywhere and it's flooded.
It's certainly pretty.
It's pretty as all get out. So, Aaron, did you have any feelings on this before we move on?
Not particularly.
All right.
She thinks we're both stupid.
We're just arguing over like the most minuscule little garbage. It's ridiculous. No, these lands are fantastic, and I can't wait to open one. Yada yada. We're gonna bring it around to the finisher. Now, the finisher this week, the Community Cup is later this month. And should the community team win, it was announced that players who log into MTGO during the event will get a full art Battle for Zendikar basic land. But should the Wizards team win, we will get a foiled Drown in Sorrow. Aww. So for Magic Online Community Cup 2016, that's next year, what should the player prizes be?
Well, for being on the community winning side in 2016, MTGO players will receive foil copies of Mox Ruby in honor of one of the captains next year, Louis Scott Vargas.
Get wrecked, son. Hashtag REKT. You know what I'm saying? Done. Ruben?
I guess he's well known for playing that card.
Playing Moxies.
Well, if you log into Magic Online during MTG OCC 2016 and the Wizards team wins, boo, then you will get a foil Magister of Worth in honor of MTGO's benevolent overlord. Praise be unto him.
Yes.
Evan, what was that thing you called him? Our Lady of Exemptions?
Oh, no, you clearly do not watch Last Week Tonight.
Oh, yeah, that was Last Week Tonight. Our Lady of Perpetual Exemption?
Yes, they actually created a church because they were trying to explain how ridiculous televangelism is, and people actually started sending money to him.
Although, Our Lady of Perpetual Exemption is really good for MTGO. That is actually kind of fun.
Nice, because, yeah. Anyway, which leads me into, regardless of who's winning, in 2016, players who log in will get their very own foil copy of Second Chance for logging into Magic Online in the first place.
Yep, there you go. Yeah. Well done, people who logged in.
So good. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for another episode of Magic Mike's. Ruben, thank you very much. Aaron, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You guys are great. We're going to move into our final slide here. And as always, thank you for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. I want to thank my co-hosts, you guys, for watching, and hope you follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, and do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv/magicmikes, on Twitter at magicmikescast, and on Facebook at facebook.com/magicmikes. Just /magicmikes. That's where you're at. Facebook.com/magicmikes. Talk to us privately at magicmikespodcast@gmail.com. Join the audio-only podcast and or follow it at magicmikespodcast.libsyn.com or find us on iTunes. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.